Welcome back. In this lesson, we're going to look at the NPC idle state. So if we just walk up to an NPC, we can see this NPC is in a patrol state at the moment, but if we get close, she starts idling. Also, she rotates towards us. Seems like a little bit of head tracking too, maybe. And if we walk away, she goes back to patrol state. But not every NPC is like that. So we see that Pooh also rotates towards the player, but I think there may be some cases where we don't want the NPC to actually rotate in the idle state, maybe just track with the head. So we'll also make that a feature. So let's jump to Unity. So first thing we're going to do is go in our NPC folder, go in our states, and let's create a new state. So create C# script, idle state. Now let's delete all this. And because this is going to be a non-playable character state, we're going to derive from that. So non-playable character state. Then we go here, we go right click, quick actions and refactoring, and then implement abstract class. Now let's just change the order of this stuff so it makes more sense. So first would be our init, that should be the top one, and then we should go enter state, that should go after, and then we'll go update state, change state, and then we'll leave exit state for last. So let's just clean this up a little bit. Let's remove these from now until we start using them. So just like another state, in our init state, what we want to do is initiate the state key. So state key equals non-playable character controller dot NPC states. This one will be dot idle. On our enter state then, because we're idle, we know that the forward amount is going to be 0. So we can say core dot forward amount equals 0, and then let's just remove these for now. Now in our change state, we will return non-playable character controller NPC states dot none. We'll add some logic here later. So now let's think of the logic for our patrol state. So in the game, when the character is patrolling, or an NPC is patrolling, and the player gets close, once within a certain distance, then the NPC exits the patrol state and then goes to the idle state. Let's just go to that patrol state. So we're going to need a new variable, say serialized field float, let's say min distance from target before idle. So let's just rename this to something clear. So min distance from waypoint target. Now we're going to need to find the player to do these calculations. So an easy way we can do that is let's just say transform player. In our init state, let's say that player equals GameObject dot find GameObject with tag, and we'll make this player. And of course, this is a transform, so let's just say dot transform, and I'll collect our player. So let's just do that now before we forget. Let's go back to our game. Let's go to our player tag player. Also, let's just update the prefab, so apply all. Let's go back to our script. So we're going to change the state to idle if the player is within range. So let's actually create a function to get the player distance. So if we go back to our non-playable character controller, and if we go down to the core, let's add a function here that will be reused in multiple classes for the NPC. And we're just going to say public, it's going to return a float, and then distance from target, and now we're just going to return vector3 dot distance. Of course, here we need to take in the target, so transform target. So from our mTransform dot position to target dot position. Now if we go back to our patrol state, now we'll need to bring in the core here. So if we actually need to go back to our non-playable character state script, in our change state, let's add in the non-playable character core. We'll have to update this, of course, within our script. Let's go back to our patrol state. Now here we can just copy this in like before. And now we can say core dot get distance from target, and we'll just put in the player. If this value is less than or equal to the minimum distance before idle, then we're going to return non-playable character controller dot NPC states dot idle. Perfect. Now let's see if we can just test this out now. Let's go to our NPC. Let's attach the idle state script. Now we need to fix this one issue. Go back to our idle state. We need to add the core to the change state. So we've attached the idle script. Let's just drag it up so it's beside the patrol state. So we also need to add it in our NPC controller. Just add the core. So the min distance from waypoint target has been reset. Let's just say 0.15, and then min distance from target before idle, let's say 2. Remember that our player and the NPC have a collider on them with a radius, so there's going to be a certain distance there where they can't touch each other, so it needs to be greater than that, so greater than the 2 combined radiuses of the player and the NPC. So I think 2 should be fine for now. We'll see how it goes. Now let's press play. Let's walk over to our NPC. And she stops. She's in her idle position. And if we walk away, she stays in the idle. So let's just fix that now. Go back to our script. Now we want to go to our idle script. So in our change state, we're going to do basically the same thing again, but opposite. Let's add some variables. Serialized field. We actually need to add back using the engine for this. Say float. This will be the maximum distance, I suppose. Maximum distance away from the NPC before the NPC returns to patrol state. So max distance before patrol. Now if we just go to our patrol state, we can copy and paste this, I suppose, into our idle state. And then we'll change this to greater than the max distance. And then this will return patrol. And we need to also capture our player here. So let's do the same thing. Player will equal this. Put that in our init. Let's just say transform player. Now in some cases we might have an NPC that only has an idle state and does not have a patrol state to actually go to. So let's just make sure we have that covered in our NPC controller. Let's go back. Now you see here in update current state, we just take in the next state and then we change the state then. But what if the state doesn't exist? So let's add some logic for that instead. So make some room here. If states dot contains key next state, then we can do this. And I suppose you can also add this. So next state does not equal none, and states contains key next state. I think that should cover us. Now let's go back to your idle state. Let's make sure it's set up correctly. So max distance. Okay, so let's go back now. Go to our NPC, max distance for patrol. So we'll set this higher than what this value is. So let's say 6. And if we go play the game again, and if we walk towards the player or the NPC, she stops. Now let's walk away. And just like that, she goes back to the patrol state. Cool. So we're almost there already. Everything else now is just some finishing touches to make it more visually nice. So the next thing we're going to work on is the head rotation. So anything to do with the animator, we should always do directly on the animator itself. So what I mean by that is, if we're manipulating the animator for a script, that script should be attached to the same game object as the animator. Let's go to our scripts folder. Let's create a new folder and call it animation. Let's enter this folder. Now let's create a new script and let's call this animator hook. We'll click to open. Now let's remove this stuff. Let's just add our require component like we usually do. Type of, and this time of course it's going to be animator. Now let's just collect our animator. Let's delete these for now. So animator, call animator, and then in our start, animator will equal get component animator. Now because this will be attached to the animator, we have access to this method called on animator IK. This will let us manipulate some of the functionality of the animator. So what we want to do is set a target for the animator to look at. So animator dot set look position, and then we're going to need a look at target here. So let's create a variable for that. Go transform look at target, and we'll just create a method to collect that. So public void look at target. Let's just take a transform target, and then here we'll say our look at target equals target. And now here we will look at the look at target dot position. Let's just add a check here as well that we only do this if the look at target is defined. So is not equal to null. Let's fix this. Goes here. And then to set the head to actually look, what we need to do is say animator dot set look at weight. And now the first one will be 1. The next one will be 0 because that's the body, and we don't want the body to move, we just want the head to move. And for head weight, let's just say 1 for now, but we'll change this in a second. And then the last variable here is amount. So let's just leave this blank for now, and I'll show you why we're going to add an extra variable here. So now if we go back to non-playable character controller, if we go down to the non-playable character core, let's just add a public animator hook. Let's just call it animator hook, and that will be collected here. Animator hook equals in transform dot get component in children. Animator hook, let's just remove this type of and change these. And now in our idle state, let's say when we enter the state, we want to say core dot animator hook dot look at target player. So let's just see how this works now. And if we walk towards the NPC, she stops. We got an error. Let's check out what this is. We didn't add the hook to the NPC model, so go to the model. Now here we go, animator hook. Let's try this again. It's not working. Why is that? So the reason for that is actually we're not letting an IK pass happen on the model or on the animator. So we can click on our model, or we can even click on our player model because they use the same animator. We'll click on the model, go to our animator tab, then go to layer. When I hit this gear icon, and then click this for an IK pass. Now if we try again this time, that should work, fingers crossed. And there we go. Now we see some weird behavior here. The NPC is looking very low, and that's because it's looking at the player transform, which is actually at the player's feet. Also, she has a really wide field of view. I want to cut that down a bit. Now what we could do is add a better look at target, not just the player's feet. So instead we would pass through maybe the player's head or something like that, which is easy enough to do, but I think an even easier way is to add a offset. So let's say serialized field, gonna be a float, and let's say Y look at offset. Now let's go here, let's create a vector 3 look at position will be look at target dot position, and then look at position dot y will plus equal the y offset. Now if we use that instead, look at position, and we go back to our game, I think we'll make this 1.5. That should be around where the player's head is. And let's go back over to our NPC. There we go. Now we can see that she's more eye level with the player, but again we still have that neck turning goes a bit too far. So that's when we go back to this, what we mentioned, this one extra override. Here is the amount, so 1 will be 100%. So let's go 0.75 F, which is 75% of the motion. So this is actually taking the eye weight next. So I think we can actually make this 0. Yep, there we go. So it's the clamp weight we're looking for. So set to 75%. Let's go back, walk over, and there we go. We can see she turns her head. Not too far this time. If we walk away, she returns to the patrol state. Now when she walks away, she actually still looks at us while she's walking. I don't think I want that. So instead, if we go back to our animator hook for the head weight, we will change from either 0 if she's in patrol state or 1 if she's in idle state. So we'll just create a boolean here. Let's say bool is looking at target, and then here when we use this, we'll say is looking at target equals true. Let's create a new method now. Public void stop looking at target, and then we'll say is looking at target equals false. Now if we come back up here, let's just say int head weight equals, and now if is looking at target, then we want it to be 1, and if not, then 0. Now let's replace the head weight from 1 to this new variable. Now if we go back to our idle state and our exit now, we will say core dot animator hook dot stop looking at target. And let's go back. So she looks at us, and if we walk away, her head goes back forward again. Cool. Now the last thing we want to do is make the NPC rotate towards us like we've seen. So for the animation from that, we're going to go to maximum like always. So if we just go up to search and type in turn, press enter, and it's the first animation here is the one we're going to use. So again, as always, download, change format to FBX for Unity, download with skin, and download. Once that's downloaded, drag and drop in there, same as always. Now in our animations folder, animations, let's just drag and drop this in. Now let's say model or rig, humanoid, apply. Now let's get the animation, Control D to duplicate it. We can delete this now. And turning, so let's just look at the animation. Let's drag and drop and model in first. If we tick this, we can see that this animation is for turning right. So let's just F2, rename it to turn right. And for our turn left animation, we're just going to duplicate this, rename it to turn left, and we're going to mirror. There we go. If we go to our NPC models animator controller, let's go in here, let's create a new blend tree. This is called turning. And then if we go into this, let's create some motion fields. So let's also create a new parameter, a float called turn amount. Let's change this from forward to turn amount. So if turn amount is -1, we're going to be turning left. If it is 0, we can just put on our idle animation. And then if it's 1, we're going to be turning right. Let's go back out. And now here we can actually make a transition. Let's also create a boolean value here in our animator. Is turning. And now in our conditions, we can say if is turning is true, we go into this blend tree, and then we come back out then if is turning is false. And that's also this uncheck has exit time. And we'll leave everything else as default for now. We'll change it later maybe if it looks like it needs adjustments. Now let's go back to our scripts. Let's go to our idle state, and let's just create a function for rotate here. So void rotate, and we're going to need the NPC transform. So transform, it's called end transform, and we'll also need the animator. So animator, and this is called animator. Now if we remember, not all idle NPCs actually rotate. So let's just create a serializable field, a boolean value, and let's just say can rotate. And then in our update state, if can rotate, then rotate. Then we'll just put in core dot m transform, and then core dot animator. We're also going to need to set a rotate speed. So let's go serialize field. This will be a float, and let's just call it rotate speed. Now back down to this method. We're going to need to find the target direction that we need to rotate towards. So vector3, let's just call it target dir equals, and it's going to be our player dot position minus our end transform dot position. Now we need to find the angle between our NPC and the player. So that's going to be a float angle. It's going to equal vector3 dot angle, and then it's going to be from our end transform dot forward. So it's dependent on direction, and then it's between that and our target direction. Now, if the angle is greater, so this will be kind of the angle before he starts rotating, because we don't want this to track the player. We kind of want field of view before the NPC actually rotates. So I think something like 90 degrees would be good, so maybe 45 each side. So this angle will always be a positive. So we're going to say 45. We're going to set our animator, set bool. Now if you remember, we created that boolean called is turning, and we're going to set that to true. And then our float animator dot set float, and we call that turning amount, I think. Now the value for this will depend on if the NPC needs to turn left or turn right. So we need to determine that before we go forward. So the way we do that is we get the cross product. So vector3 is called cross product, and that will equal vector3 dot cross or m transform dot forward and our target direction. And then if we create a boolean called is right will equal if the cross product dot y is less than 0. So if it's less than 0, we know the NPC needs to turn right. If it's greater, it's going to turn left. So now we can just create a float, call it turn amount, and then that will equal, if it's right, it's going to be -1, and then if it's left, it's going to be 1. Now we can just put that into here. Let's just change this to an integer as well, since we don't need it to be a float. Now let's add some smoothing in here as well to make this look nicer. So let's just say 0.25f and then time dot delta time. So if we look here to set float, what we just added there is some damping time and then the damp time. Now we need capture our target rotation, so it's going to be quaternion. This is called target rotation. It's going to equal quaternion dot look rotation at the target direction, and then simply m transform dot rotation equals quaternion dot slurp and transform dot rotation to our target rotation, and then it's going to be a rotate speed multiplied by time dot delta time. And then we could probably capture this time dot delta time in our update. So let's just do that. Float time, or let's call it delta, it's going to equal time dot delta time, and we'll just pass that in to this function, float delta, and then we'll just change this to delta. Let's add it in here, delta. Now that should be it. And if the angle is not greater than 45, we'll say else animator is turning will be false. Let's change that to false. The turn amount, we'll just set that to 0. Now let's go back to our game. Let's click on our NPC. Let's make sure he can rotate, and then rotate speed. We'll probably change this as we go on, but let's just say 1 for now. Press play. So there we go. We see an error here, parameter turning amount does not exist. We just call it turn amount. Let's just copy that, go back to our code, let's just change that. And let's move around. But you can see it's working. We can fine tune some values here. I think we actually have our animations mixed up, or we have our values mixed up. and we'll say that if it's right, it'll be 1, then if it's left, -1. And we're also just going to make the NPC a little bit slower, so let's go to the nav mesh agent. So let's change this to 1. Also, we can see that the NPC was floating in the air like our player was. So we'll just do the same fix. We'll go to our model. Let's just drop it down -0.1 maybe. Let's see how that looks. She's on the ground yet. It looks good. Walking slower. Now if we start turning, I think this looks good. Now let's just make sure that these animations are actually looping when we want them to. Now if we just lower the rotation speed, let's say 0.75, I think that looks better, looks more natural. Actually look like she's turning towards us, and if we walk away, she goes back to patrol. So that'll do it for this lesson. If you like what you're seeing, maybe consider subscribing, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.